King James I of England and VI of Scotland holds a unique position in the history of witchcraft, particularly in how his beliefs and actions shaped the way witchcraft was viewed and prosecuted during his reign. His interest in witchcraft not only influenced the public perception of witches, but also had significant legal, political and religious implications across England and Scotland. James's fascination with witchcraft began during his time as King James VI of Scotland, a country where the belief in witchcraft had deep cultural roots. Scottish society, steeped in superstition and religious fervour, frequently saw witchcraft as an explanation for natural disasters, illness and misfortune. James grew up in this environment and was heavily influenced by these prevailing beliefs. The pivotal moment that solidified James's fear and fascination with witchcraft came in 1590, when he became directly involved in the North Berwick witch trials. This series of trials unfolded after James's marriage to Anne of Denmark and their troubled sea journey back to Scotland, during which their ships were battered by storms. Blaming the storms on witchcraft, James became convinced that a conspiracy of witches was working against him. He personally supervised the interrogation and torture of suspected witches, marking the start of his active role in the Scottish witch hunts. These events were crucial in shaping James's beliefs about witchcraft, reinforcing his view that witches were not just a local threat, but part of a grander satanic plot to undermine Christian kingship and the social order. James's belief in witchcraft was not only personal but intellectual, as evidenced by his authorship of Daemonologie, a treatise published in 1597. Written while he was still in Scotland, Daemonologie was a detailed defense of the reality of witchcraft demons and their ability to influence the world through magical means. The book, divided into 3 parts, discusses the origin of witchcraft, its connection to the devil and the ways in which witches can be identified and prosecuted. Daemonologie serves as a reflection of James's deeply ingrained fear of witchcraft and his belief in its existence. The treatise was also a call to arms, urging magistrates and authorities to be vigilant in identifying and punishing witches. James argued that witchcraft was not just a spiritual concern but a political one, as it threatened the divine right of kings and the stability of the kingdom. This book became an influential text in shaping how witchcraft was perceived both in Scotland and later in England. While Daemonologie was not a work of original theology or jurisprudence, it was significant in that it gave royal legitimacy to witch hunts. As a monarch, James's endorsement of witch trials had a direct impact on the legal processes and severity of witchcraft prosecutions. When James ascended to the English throne in 1603, his views on witchcraft carried over into his new kingdom. Although witch trials had been part of English society for some time, James's reign marked a period of increased focus on witchcraft as a political and religious issue. One of the first things James did upon assuming the English throne was to tighten the existing laws on witchcraft. The Witchcraft Act of 1604 replaced the earlier Elizabethan law, making the punishment for invoking evil spirits more severe. Under this law, the use of witchcraft that resulted in harm or death was punishable by execution. James's legal reforms reflected his personal beliefs as outlined in Daemonologie and led to an increase in the number of witch trials and executions during his reign. Notably, while James initially took a hard stance on witchcraft, his views became more measured later in his reign. He began to doubt some of the more fantastical claims made by witch hunters and occasionally intervened to prevent wrongful executions. His skepticism grew in part due to several high-profile cases of false accusations, such as the case of Anne Gunter in 1605, in which a woman claimed to be bewitched but was later found to be lying. Although James remained a firm believer in the reality of witchcraft, he increasingly advocated for more careful investigations and less reliance on superstition alone as evidence. James's influence on the belief in witchcraft was not limited to legal reforms or intellectual treatises. It extended deeply into the cultural and religious fabric of the time. His active involvement in witch trials and his intellectual endorsement of witchcraft's existence lent credibility to the fear of witches, both among the elite and the general populace. In an age where the monarchy was a powerful force in shaping public opinion, James's endorsement of witch hunts reinforced and amplified the existing superstitions about witchcraft. In the early 17th century, witchcraft was not just seen as a supernatural phenomenon, but as a crime against the state and the church. James's insistence that witchcraft was a diabolical conspiracy aligned with broader European trends during the height of the witch-hunting era. His stance provided a theological and political justification for the persecution of witches, linking witchcraft with heresy and rebellion against the divine order. While James's later reign saw moderation in his personal stance on witchcraft, the culture of fear and suspicion he helped foster persisted long after his death. The witch hunts of the 17th century, both in England and in colonial America, can be traced back to the climate of fear James helped create, where accusations of witchcraft were often tied to broader anxieties about political instability, social change, and religious heresy. By the time of James's death in 1625, the fervour surrounding witchcraft was beginning to wane, but his influence on the witch hunts remained significant. While witch trials and executions did not immediately cease after his reign, the intellectual and cultural climate started to shift. The Enlightenment, which emphasized reason and skepticism, gradually undermined the belief in witchcraft that had been so pervasive during the Renaissance and early modern periods. James's legacy in relation to witchcraft is thus twofold. On the one hand, he was a monarch who legitimized and actively participated in witch trials, reinforcing the belief in the power of witches and the necessity of their punishment. His treatise Daemonologie and legal reforms contributed to the cultural and legal structures that sustained witch hunts. On the other hand, his later Skepticism and Moderation foreshadowed the eventual decline of these practices, as Rationalism began to challenge the old superstitions. King James I had a profound impact on the belief in witchcraft during his reign, both in Scotland and in England. His personal experiences, intellectual writings, and legal reforms helped shape the societal understanding of witchcraft, transforming it from a folk belief into a political and religious issue of national importance. James's involvement in witch trials, particularly during his early reign, reinforced the public fear of witches and provided a royal endorsement for their persecution. Although his views became more skeptical later in life, the culture of fear he helped cultivate endured, influencing the witch hunts that followed in both England and the American colonies. Ultimately, James's legacy in the history of witchcraft is a complex one. He was a monarch who both perpetuated and questioned the fear of witches, leaving behind a legacy that reflects the shifting attitudes of an era caught between superstition and the dawn of modernity.